Hello friends, very beautiful and enlightening greetings of today. Today I would like to wish you a very happy Lori. May this beautiful festival of warmth and light fill your lives with great sanctity and peace in every aspect of your lives, helping you to glorify and blossom with godly blessings. Dear friends, I, Kunal Nagpal, welcome you to today's session with great enthusiasm. Dear friends, in today's economic diet, we are basically going to discuss the great insights presented by our eminent ministers, our respected Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, our Finance Minister Dr. Nirmala Sitharaman, and our External Affairs Minister Dr. S. J. Shankar. So, here, let's begin. Basically, Modi ji urges the youth to pick up the new skills. Recently, we had discussed the great insights of our great pioneer and spiritual saint, Swami Vivekananda, on the occasion of National Youth Day, which is basically celebrated as the Remembrance Day on his birth anniversary. So, on that particular aspect, I would like to present a few lines which Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji said while addressing the youth of the country. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji on Thursday, that is 12th January 2023, urged the youth to keep learning the new skills, as many jobs that do not even exist today might turn out to be the mainstream ones in future, pointing to the fast-paced emergence of cutting-edge technologies. The runway is ready for your takeoff. This is a very powerful statement made by our PM. I repeat, the runway is ready for your takeoff. Today, there is great optimism in the world towards India and its youth. He said after opening the National Youth Festival at Hubballi on Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary. Today, there are global voices saying that this century is actually India's century. This is a historic time when optimism and opportunity are actually coming together. Modi ji called for positive disruptions in every sector to fulfill the aspirations of the youth and move past even the developed nations. The new National Education Policy, that is NEP, he said, focused on a practical and futuristic education system. The Prime Minister urged the youth to have faith in their new ideas and work on them even if they are ridiculed. So, if you have any new idea, remember that you may be ridiculed or opposed. But if you believe in your idea with great conviction, then stick to it, he said, adding that every idea usually went through the stages of ridicule, protest, and finally acceptance. So this is really empowering for the future assets of the nation. Now, I would like to iterate the mantra which PM gave while addressing the Global South Summit. That is, respond, recognize, respect, and reform to actually re-energize the world. The Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji launched India's unique initiative, that is the Global South Summit on Thursday, that is 12th January 2023, pointing out that the world is in a state of crisis and told the leaders of developing countries, your voice is actually India's voice, and your priorities are India's priorities. As he basically prescribed the mantra of respond, recognize, respect, and reform to re-energize the world. While addressing the first session of the two-day special virtual summit, Modi ji said, "We, the Global South, have the largest stakes in the future. Most of the global challenges have not been created by the Global South, but they affect us more." India has always shared its developmental experience with our brothers of the Global South. As India begins its G20 presidency this year, it is natural that our aim is to amplify the voice of the Global South, he added. Modi ji gave his mantra to deal with the challenges of the Global South, that is, to re-energize the world. We should together call for a global agenda of respond, recognize, respect, and reform. I repeat, respond, recognize, respect, and reform. These 4 R's are actually very, very crucial. Respond to the priorities of the Global South by framing an inclusive and balanced international agenda. Then, recognize that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities applies to all global challenges. Then respect the sovereignty of all nations, rule of law, and peaceful resolution of differences and disputes. And finally, reform the international institutions, including the United Nations, to make them more relevant, he suggested. This is really excellent. I would like to repeat it. Respond to the priorities of the Global South by framing an inclusive and balanced international agenda. Second step, that is the second R, is recognize that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities applies to all global challenges. Then, respect the sovereignty of all nations, rule of law, and peaceful resolution of differences and disputes. And finally, reform the international institutions, including the United Nations, to make them more relevant, as per the suggestion of our respected Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. It is quite clear the world is in a state of crisis. It is very difficult to predict how long this state of instability will last. The PM told the participating leaders, most global challenges have not been created by the Global South, but they affect us more. He flagged the issue of food, fuel, and fertilizer shortage and attributed it to war, conflict, political tension, and impact of the pandemic. We have turned the page on another difficult year that saw war, conflict, terrorism, and geopolitical tensions, rising food, fertilizer, and fuel prices, climate change-driven natural disasters, and lasting economic impact of the COVID pandemic. India has always stood for a greater role for the developing countries in determining our common future, he said, adding, in the last century, we supported each other in our fight against the foreign rule. We can do it again in this century as well, to create a new world order that will ensure the welfare of our citizens. In the 20th century, the developed countries were the drivers of the global economy. Today, most of these advanced economies are actually slowing down. Clearly, in the 21st century, global growth will come from the countries of the South. I think that if we work together, we can set the global agenda, Modi ji noted. This Voice of Global South Summit under the theme Unity of Voice, Unity of Purpose envisages bringing together the countries of the Global South to share their perspectives and priorities on a common platform. More than 120 countries have been invited to participate in this summit. The officials here said India will work to ensure that the valuable inputs generated from the partner countries in the Voice of Global South Summit deliberations receive due cognizance globally. They added, India's ongoing presidency of the G20 provides a strong and special opportunity for those countries that are not part of the G20 process to share their ideas and expectations from the G20. This is actually in line with Modi ji's statement that India's G20 presidency will be shaped in consultation with not just the partner countries, but also the fellow travelers in the global south, whose voice often goes unheard, officials said. The summit comprises 10 sessions, 4 on January 12 and 6 sessions on January 13. Each session will actually witness the participation of leaders and ministers from 10 to 20 countries. So, the 8 ministerial sessions have the following themes. First, Finance Minister's session on financing the people-centric development. Then, Environment Minister's session on balancing growth with environment-friendly lifestyles, that is LIFE. Then, the Foreign Minister's session on priorities of the Global South ensuring a conducive environment. Then, the Energy Minister's session on energy security and development, a roadmap to prosperity. Then, followed with the Health Minister's session on cooperation to build resilient healthcare systems, followed with the Education Minister's session on human resource development and capacity building. Then, further, Commerce and Trade Minister's session on developing synergies in the Global South, trade, technology, tourism, and resources. And finally, the Foreign Minister's session on G20, suggestions for India's presidency. Now, dear friends, we are moving forward to go through the insights presented by our respected Finance Minister, Dr. Nirmala Sitharaman ji. And she basically stresses on the need to push for the reforms in multilateral institutions. So, according to her, India will push for reforms in the multilateral institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, that is the IMF, and the World Bank during its G20 presidency in order to make them more attuned to the needs of the developing world. The Finance Minister, Dr. Nirmala Sitharaman, quoted this on Thursday while addressing the Global South Summit. India basically appreciates the contribution of the multilateral institutions and the development banks in dealing with the global challenges. However, with new challenges having emerged, including the COVID-19 pandemic, a major scale-up of the response mechanisms is actually required, and strengthening of the multilateral institutions is the basic priority, Dr. Sitharaman said. She was speaking at the Voice of Global South Summit, a virtual summit spearheaded by the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. She said the recent geopolitical tensions and the pandemic had aggravated the global debt vulnerabilities. So if left unaddressed, these mounting debt vulnerabilities can trigger the global south recession and hence the global recession, and therefore push millions into extreme poverty. Under India's G20 presidency, financing for the social dimensions of sustainable development is actually an important priority, Dr. Sitharaman said. This is the main highlight, so I wish to repeat it once again. Dr. Sitharaman said the recent geopolitical tensions and the pandemic had aggravated the global debt vulnerabilities. So, if left unaddressed, these mounting debt vulnerabilities can trigger global recession and push millions into extreme poverty. Under India's G20 presidency, financing for the social dimension of sustainable development is actually an important priority. Dr. Sitaraman said, Global South is actually a term used to describe emerging and poorer nations in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania, as opposed to the global North, which are primarily the developed nations from North America and Europe. We strongly believe there should not be any first world or a third world, but just one world with a shared understanding for a common future. Truly beautiful. Dr. Sitaraman said this while speaking on the theme of financing people-centric development. India is hosting the Voice of Global South Summit under the leadership of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji with the participation of over 120 countries. The theme of the summit is actually unity of voice, unity of purpose. And my dear friends, this is the basic requirement, the basic need of the hour, that is unity of voice, and the unity of purpose. That is, we need to act in a very, very unified approach, conceptualizing the overall framework of global family with a unified approach, the holistic team effort, which is the basic requirement in order to establish a world free of war, free of any type of tension, and hence focusing towards holistic development. Now, after going through this extremely insightful and detailed discussion, I would like to present the views of Dr. S. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, who calls for sharing of the best practices among the Global South nations. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, said on Thursday, that is on 12th January, India has emerged as a Global South education and healthcare center. That is the basic hub for education and healthcare, and therefore called for sharing of the best practices among the countries of the Global South. India has emerged as a global south education and healthcare hub. Our capacity building programs and first responder activities in humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, that is HADR situations, are very important expressions of this particular approach. The International Solar Alliance, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and now the Mission Life, a worldwide program to promote a climate-friendly lifestyle, are all proof of the priority that we accord in our overall diplomacy. And of course, during COVID, we walked the talk of international cooperation by providing the vaccines to over 100 partners and medicines to over 150 countries, said Dr. S. Jaishankar during a special online session during the Voices of the Global South Summit. We are also very keen for an exchange of the best practices between our countries. There is actually plenty that we can all learn from each other. India looks forward to simple, scalable, and sustainable solutions from all over the Global South that can ensure the betterment of our people. Indirectly chiding China, Dr. Jaishankar said, while offering these thoughts, I would stress that India's record speaks for itself. We have implemented the development projects in 78 countries. that are demand driven, transparent, empowerment oriented, environment friendly, and rely on a consultative approach, all the while ensuring respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. China, on the other hand, has been accused of pushing the projects under Belt and Road Initiative without adequate consultation, pushing the countries into debt trap and harnessing the natural resources, often violating the environmental norms. So, my dear friends, he has basically presented a case for the global south sensitive model of globalization becoming stronger. The External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar on 12th January said the case for a global south sensitive model of globalization is actually becoming stronger by the day, and hence India stands for a shift from self-centered globalization to one that is human-centered. Addressing the foreign ministers' session at the Voice of Global South Summit, Dr. Shankar said the conference was actually conceived as a platform for developing countries to share their concerns, perspectives, and priorities. India clearly sees that the key concerns of the developing world are not being captured in G20 debates and discussions, he added. Whether it is the impact of the COVID pandemic, climate change, terrorism, ongoing conflicts and debt crisis, the search for the solutions does not give due weightage to the needs and aspirations of the global south. We therefore wanted to ensure that India's G20 presidency gathers that voice, the perspectives, the priorities of the global south and articulates that clearly in its debates, Dr. Shankar said. So, noting that the world is actually becoming increasingly volatile and uncertain for the South, Dr. Shankar said the COVID-19 period has highlighted the danger of over-centralized globalization and fragile supply chains. The knock-on effects of the Ukraine conflict were a further stress, especially on food, energy, and fertilizer security. The capital flows started constricting even as the debts mounted. The international financial institutions and multilateral development banks have struggled to assess and address these concerns effectively. The concerns over a COVID resurgence are further dampening the sentiment, he said. So he has very wonderfully articulated the entire matter so well, which is taking the holistic consideration of the strategic matters of paramount concern for the global economy. Truly marvelous. In the backdrop of unkept promises, the developing countries are also expected to bear the burden of the developing climate resilience, industrialize without carbonizing, deal with increasing climate events, and lift millions out of poverty, all at the same time, while managing the disruptions and uncertainties in the global supply chains, Dr. Shankar said. Those who were promised an interconnected world now actually see a world with higher walls, insensitive to the social needs and discriminatory in its health practices, the minister added. That is highlighting the fact with the expectation or the goals. That is, what is the realistic scenario which is existing as of now, and what were the expectations, what were our goals, what were our vision for actually maximizing the sustainable development goals, the vision of the sustainable development goals, but what is the actual status? That is, those who were promised an interconnected world now actually see a world with higher walls, insensitive to the social needs, and discriminatory in its health practices, the minister added. Dr. Jaishankar stressed that the case for a global south sensitive model of globalization is actually becoming stronger by the day. So, India stands for three fundamental shifts that can create a conducive environment, and one of those is the model of globalization, from self-centered globalization to the human-centered globalization, he said. This means shifting the focus more on development as a whole, he added. And my dear friends, this would actually help us to actually accelerate our efforts towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as we have seen in our preceding sessions as well, the UNDP, that is the United Nations Development Program, has been appreciating India's efforts towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. That is how the Indian economy is progressing towards the attainment of this particular vision of sustainable development, of actually making that a reality. We can advance our efforts by following the strategy of our visionary leaders. The minister also called for a different approach to innovation and technology. From being on the receiving end of technological patronage to deploying the global South-led innovations for the societal transformations. So this is really amazing. Till now, we have been seeing the campaign of Make in India, Atmanirbharta, maximizing the self-reliance and self-sufficiency. But now our minister is actually of the idea to deploy the global South-led innovations for societal transformations. This is really amazing. Not only Make in India, but also global South-led innovations, that is emphasizing on the concept of being a creator and then distributing your technology, your prowess, your manufacturing prowess across the globe. That is maximizing on your speciality and overall productivity. That is capitalizing on your core strengths. This is really amazing. Thank you so much, sir, for your visionary approach and awakening the masses across the society. Further, on development cooperation, Dr. Jaishankar called for a shift from debt-creating projects to a demand-driven and sustainable development cooperation. We would also work towards decentralizing and de-risking the globalization. Such a model would actually offer greater opportunities to many more nations, including to all of you. It would entail a stronger desire to foster localization, improve connectivity, and reconfigure the supply chains in order to ensure economic security, he said. Talking about innovation and technology, Dr. Jaishankar said, India stands ready to share its experiences and expertise. In particular, we have deployed the game-changing digital public goods in universal identification, financial payments, direct benefit transfer, that is DBT, digital health, commerce, industry, and logistics. They will be both affordable and accessible to the global south, he said. We are also very keen for an exchange of the best practices between our countries. There is plenty that we can all learn from each other. India looks forward to simple, scalable, and sustainable solutions from all over the global south that can ensure the betterment of our people, he said. Dr. Jaishankar also highlighted that India has implemented the development projects in 78 countries that are demand-driven, transparent, empowerment-oriented, environment-friendly, and rely on a consultative approach. All the while ensuring respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, he added. Noting that India has also emerged as an education and healthcare hub for the global south, Dr. Jaishankar said the country's capacity building programs and first responder activities in case of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, that is the HADR situations, are very important examples of this particular approach. The International Solar Alliance, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and now the Mission Life, a worldwide program to promote a climate-friendly lifestyle, are all proof of the priority that India accords in its diplomacy, he said. And of course, during COVID, we walked the talk of international cooperation by providing vaccines to over 100 partners and medicines to over 150 countries, Dr. Jaishankar said. So, my dear friends, this is the very well articulated content as being presented by our eminent leaders whom we are very proud of, who are representing our country at the international forum so strategically that that will help to accelerate not only the development of our economy, but will help to accelerate the global development, not only enhancing the overall confidence and self-esteem of their own citizens, but also the citizens across the globe, of the neighboring countries, and obviously across the globe. And that's our basic objective of the G20 presidency, the responsibility, the noble responsibility which we have taken for this particular year. This is truly marvelous. And again, I would like to emphasize that this type of feeling can emerge only when in the back of mind we think as the global family as a unified concept. This is truly wonderful. The beautiful sense of belongingness and a very noble intent of holistic development, of the development of all the masses across the globe, to empower each and every citizen to conduct the SWOT analysis on a regular basis, to be aware of one's strength and to capitalize those strengths in a very, very beautiful and strategic manner. This is the real role model's job, and that's why they are justifying their positions of holding such responsible position in the society. And that's why India is a bright spot in the gloomy global economic scenario. Here we have seen that the pestle analysis and the SWOT analysis has been conducted and demonstrated so beautifully, making people aware of what are the upcoming threats, of what are the upcoming opportunities, so that we can make the preparations accordingly, simultaneously emphasizing on the major areas of strength on which we can capitalize. This is really marvelous. This is really marvelous. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, our respected ministers. Thank you. So, my dear friends, I certainly believe that this particular session, like always, must have filled your hearts with great feelings of patriotism, also simultaneously carrying great sense of responsibility towards the self, towards the society as a whole. So, I find these types of sessions very, very important in order to awaken a feeling of self-consciousness, and also I feel very proud when I am even able to ignite the ray of hope even in one even in the heart of one individual, I feel really great. And I hope it is doing the same effect on you as well. And I would be really grateful if you could spread this particular word, if you could spread this particular word to your friend circle at best possible level, your friend circle, your social circle, so that all of them get aware of their basic responsibilities, and they can also help to further ignite hope in their own site, in their own friend circle. This would help to develop a chain of mass awakening. Right? Thank you so much for attending this session. Thank you so much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.